when we eat food, what do? We break it down to electrons and protons. So everybody that's centralized believes that it's carbohydrates, fats, and lipids. But interestingly, when you open up a biochemistry book, you'll find out that there's no carbohydrate, lipid transporters that put food into your mitochondria. It's called electron chain transport. So do a hard stop before we talk about grounding. Turns out the story of life is all about electrons, and electrons are how we absorb light. So how does grounding work on Earth? The sun is a cathode ray. The planet is an anode. This is an electromagnetic third-grade experiment. When a cathode ray hits an anode, what happens? Free electrons come off on the surface. So do a hard stop. In other words, grounding is another way to eat without eating food. That's what I'm saying to you. Now, here's the interesting part that a lot of people don't know. Our nearest relatives that have only 400 less genes than us, chimps and gorillas, have no sweat glands on their hands and feet. So I want you to think about that for a minute, but we do. Why is that? That's the reason, humans have socks and no one else does, because our feet sweat. It's because when you have a wet connection, you make a better connection with the tectonic plate. So I want you to do another hard stop. England and Europe used to be a really good place to get really nice shoes that were leather. Can you buy leather-based shoes anymore? No, you can't. Guess what? There's another way that this whole industrial complex is trying to screw us, because then it cuts off your ability to get those free electrons. When you don't have that, you tend to eat more food, especially when the light's bad. See, that's the opposite of the leptin prescription that I wrote. So grounding is a spectacular thing that everybody should do. So when Hyde Park gets sunlight, I would like you in your Kaniki with no shoes on, running around the grass with your new baby and your wife. Why? Because the more you do that in the sun, the less food electrons you need. And that's really important in the summertime. The other big effect, to make the science really easy, sickness, the way I want you to think about it, is a collection of positive charge, okay? Health, wellness, is a collection of negative charge. So we want to have a net negative charge pretty much our whole life. The way in which you do that at your latitude is grounding and getting the sun in the summer months. In the wintertime, you want to embrace cold, because cold water has more electrons in it than warm water. That is the main reason. Going in Southampton in December actually is a benefit. Being part of the polar bear, club in the UK, I'm a big fan of in the wintertime. And do I believe where you live, grounding is best done, in the oceans or the seas that surround the UK? The answer is yes. Now, if you build your pool, kind of like you build your geothermal sauna, then I think that's a wise thing. Like if I was in the UK, I would actually spend more money outside my house than inside my house. And I probably would heat it with, wood and, natural thermal energy. I don't think I would use any of that. If I had enough money, I would probably do the whole project using geothermal, because then you're totally connected, to the Earth cycle, and you can go. And, one thing about England and, different parts of Europe that I like, it's beautiful and green outside for a large part of the year, because you guys do get enough rain, and you do get enough light that plants are happy. And plants tend to use red and blue light, because they use chlorophyll. Since we have hemoglobin, we need the purple and red. So it's a different spectrum. And when you realize that just sitting outside underneath your trees in a geothermal pool, or a pool that's grounded that you build, that would be a spectacular way for you to ground. And that way you don't have to worry about the things like you have to worry about in big European cities. Like, for example, one of the things I teach my people in the States is I don't want anybody grounding in a city, because you don't know what's underneath you, like the utilities, the wires, the pipes, because now with new modern ways to communicate, especially 3G to 5G, the way those waves have been engineered by the cell industry, they can jump to conductors that are around you. So that's the reason I told you before, I'm not really a big fan of using even the wire and the copper peg for grounding sheets, because guess what? What happens if you live next to a mast, I don't know, let's say Piccadilly Circus, and there's like 300,000 people around there connecting to watch Netflix or porno sites, the chances of you getting stray conduction through that sheet is way higher. So no, I would actually rather you not do it at that time and realize that that's a risk. And this is part of the reason why in the last 30 years, no matter which country you go in, you find out that longevity is less in big cities. That broke a trend of almost 2,000 years of human data where people had better longevity in cities. It's now changed because what have we done? We've turned cities into Chernobyls, because of the way we use light. We have it in street lights, we have it in traffic lights, we have it, in all the utilities, under the ground, but also on top of our buildings to allow us to use these horrible devices, that Google and Apple and Microsoft, want to sell us. And when you realize there's a risk of that, I do want people to know that I agree with you 100% that grounding is one of the best things we should all do. But I think the way you control this is the same way I told you about sun. I want you to embrace the sun, but I also want you to do your own grounding maneuver in your backyard. Like when you have money, if it came to you going to the Canary Islands or Tenerife or the Med, I would actually say put that off for 2 or 3 years and throw that money, if you're going to stay in the UK, and build yourself an ultimate geothermal pool and a sauna space. And then you'll have a staycation every day, but that staycation will keep you away from the NHS. I'm 100% behind that.